Okay, good morning, students. So hope you're all doing well. Welcome back to another class. Uh, Today, we'll look at why some industries tend to have more monopolies than other industries and what the reasons behind that might be. So in the previous class, we talked about perfect competition. That was one end of the spectrum of market structures, and monopolies are at the other end of market structures. Now, normally, the companies that we tend to find in uh, monopolies tend to be large companies, like electric companies, often, but not always, also telecommunications or railway companies, and essentially large utilities. So today we'll explore um, why certain industries are more prone to having monopolies. So that will be the topic of today's class. And really important, again, for you is to understand, the concept of companies' cost structures, uh, of economies of scale, which is really important here in monopolies, especially natural monopolies, and the concept of producing by marginal cost equals marginal revenue, and the price versus the marginal revenue, which is not equal in monopolies. So, before I go into the theory about graphs, let's just look at some conditions, and some other externalities that monopolies face and that apply to monopolies. All right. So, okay. So, my slide is advancing now. All right. So, monopoly is a form of imperfect competition, of course. Since we have an industry and the company is the industry. Because there's only one company. Now, imperfect competition, is where we have, again, downward sloping demand curves. The demand curve is no longer perfectly elastic, no longer horizontal, as it was in perfect competition, and also the marginal revenue, no longer equals the price. So you need to get used to that, and we'll revisit that concept. In perfect competition, now, although the market demand curve is downward sloping, the individual firm's demand curve, was perfectly elastic. So the firm was a price taker. Really important. In imperfectly competitive firms, firms have market power. They are price setters, and especially monopolies. Monopolies have extreme market power because, well, the company is the industry, so they're price setters. And that results in the marginal revenue curve being different from the demand curve. Again, we will go into certain calculations in a later part of class, maybe not today, to really illustrate why marginal revenue ends up being different from the price. So that is a really important concept for you to internalize. Today we'll stay a bit more general. Uh, for me, it's important for you to understand that you understand the graphs and the general theory behind monopolies first, before we go into calculations. Now, what's a pure monopoly? A pure monopoly is the sole supplier, of an industry output and without close substitutes. So the concept of substitutes is important, when there's a monopoly. Not only is there a company that produces a single product, but we also don't have other similar alternative products that could substitute this particular product. So if you need an internet provider, well, you need the internet. There's not really a substitute for the internet. Or if you need electricity, you need electricity, right? There's no close substitute for it. You cannot use fire, yeah, instead of electricity or steam, yeah, for instance. So yeah, it's a product without close substitutes, and you're stuck with that product. Now, pure monopolies then are market structures, yeah, where the production or sale of a particular product is therefore controlled by only one company. So the company is the industry. Now, a natural monopoly also, now let me talk about the concept of natural monopoly, right? Uh, Monopolies tend to have a bad reputation, and we'll explore the reasons why. Of course, they have a bad reputation for a reason and for valid reasons, but not all monopolies are a result of government protection or of, let's say, yeah, outside interventions or some sort of um, protectionist measures. Yeah. Often monopolies are also a natural result of their cost structures and of the nature of the industry. Yeah. So these tend to be natural monopolies. Yeah. Or these are called natural monopolies. So let's take it has to do essentially with cost advantages and scale economies, yeah, that you can only achieve when you are large. It doesn't make sense for small companies, yeah, to provide smaller outputs when the startup costs are really high. Yeah. So yeah, natural monopolies tend to form as a result. But yeah, before we go into that, let me just sum up a few of the key characteristics, yeah, that apply to monopolies. So yeah, number one, there are high entry barriers. Unlike perfect competition, yeah, where we had low entry barriers or no entry barriers, monopolies tend to be characterized by high entry barriers. Yeah, so that, and high entry barriers can be, for example, yeah, high startup costs, yeah, high fixed costs, yeah, high capital outlays. So for example, if you want to build an electric utility company or like a nuclear power plant, it's very expensive, obviously, right? You also need specific technology, specific know-how. Not everyone has that. Yeah, not everyone can simply build an electric power plant. Yeah. Um, so that capability is very limited. Yeah, and so therefore entry barriers are high, and the company is protected. Yeah. So also, if you want to build a railway network, yeah, that also tends to be associated with high capital costs, yeah, high startup costs, and uh, generally not everyone, yeah, can simply build a railroad. And yeah, it also needs to be well coordinated and so on. Yeah, sometimes also entry barriers can be a result of, let's say, government rules. Yeah, for example, certain key industries or strategic industries can be protected by the government. So the government could prohibit, for instance, outside companies, foreign companies to compete in a certain sector. Yeah, sometimes the telecommunication sector, yeah, and other sectors. So, and sometimes also patents, yeah, or other know-how can protect a company from other competitors. Yeah. So all of these are entry barriers, and they protect the company's profit in the short term, as well as in most cases in the long term as well. Yeah. Patents do expire at some point, but other structures like high cost structures, they don't expire. Yeah. And so these are permanent protective barriers essentially to monopolies. Yeah. So it's important for natural monopolies to achieve economies of scale. Yeah. So if you build a power plant, you need uh, to have customers. You need to achieve a certain number of customers in order to split that high cost of running a power plant, also the high startup cost across a large customer base. Yeah, so that you can achieve a low cost per customer, yeah, or a low average unit cost, um, which makes the whole company financially worthwhile and sustainable. Yeah. So that is the concept of scale economies. It simply wouldn't make sense to have many small companies, yeah, servicing only a small customer base because costs would be very high per customer and you would not actually achieve a lower price per customer. So in these cases, natural monopolies make more sense. Yeah. Uh, so the scale economy aspect is really important there. Now, how does the firm produce? The firm produces, of course, where it maximizes profit. Yeah, so profit maximization is still the basic assumption that we have, and therefore the universal rule, the golden rule, applies here as well. Yeah, the monopolist will also produce where marginal cost and marginal revenue are equal. So now the monopolist, of course, faces a downward sloping demand curve, yeah, for its product. And that is also the market demand curve at the same time. Yeah, so the market demand curve and the monopolist demand curve are the same and they are downward sloping. And therefore also the monopolist faces a downward sloping marginal revenue curve. Yeah, unlike companies in perfect competition, unlike industries as well in perfect competition. So the marginal revenue curve is downward sloping. The marginal revenue curve, however, is not the same as the demand curve. It diverges. Yeah, it diverges from the demand curve. And that has to do with the monopolist's price setting power. Yeah, to sell more, the monopolist has to lower the price, but it has to lower the price for everyone. Yeah, and that causes the marginal revenue curve to be different, yeah, from the demand curve. But again, we will come into yeah, we will come to that part in a later lecture, into that marginal revenue calculation part. Yeah, so for today we'll just stay on the general topic or general introductory topic of monopolies. All right. Yeah, so as I said, some examples of monopolies could include railways, yeah, or large utilities like electricity, gas, water. In smaller countries, often also there's only one telecommunications company, or internet provider or mobile provider, yeah, in smaller countries. And that also has to do with achieving scale economies. Yeah, so they're natural monopolies in that case. Okay, so let's come back to the curves again. Yeah, so everyone's favorite. Let me start out with a simple curve. Yeah, and let me just lay out the full information here. All right. Now, for a monopoly, yeah, the demand situation looks like this. So we have a regular downward sloping demand curve, and we have the marginal revenue curve. Yeah. So you can see that, yeah, the universal rule here applies as well. The more you want to sell, the lower the price has to be. Yeah. And of course, that applies to monopoly as well. So the monopoly, yeah, can lower the price and achieve higher revenue as long as it does so in the elastic, yeah, portion of the uh, demand curve. Yeah. And yeah, at the point of unit elasticity, marginal revenue becomes zero. Yeah, so a monopoly or actually any company for that matter would never produce, yeah, beyond the point where marginal revenue equals zero. Yeah, or beyond the point of unit elasticity. And yeah, especially not a monopoly either. So beyond that, demand becomes inelastic, and that means lowering the price would actually uh, result in lower revenue. Yeah, not higher revenue. Okay. Yeah, there's a video here for that. Now, a short summary video, yeah, which I would like to show you, but we will do that yeah, in the beginning of next class. So today I'll just stay a bit more on the theory and I hope you can still follow me, guys. Okay. Yeah. All right. Now, Let's add to that the cost curves. Yeah. So I know cost curves are, of course, everyone's favorite, but they won't leave us alone. Yeah. As long as we talk about market structures and production and pricing decisions, well, yeah, we have to live with the cost curves. And yeah, it's important that you internalize them, that you really understand them. Yeah. The good news is cost curves don't change. The shape of cost curves doesn't change. Yeah. Cost curves always look the way they look. Yeah, the average cost curve will always have that U shape. The marginal cost curve will always be that, well, upward sloping, yeah, basically firm's supply curve, if you will. And so these don't change. And also the intersection points are still relevant. Yeah, the intersection points with the marginal revenue curve and other curves are still very relevant. And yeah, it's important that you understand them. So let's take a look at some of the things that are going on in this graph. Yeah, the monopolist. Yeah, the monopolist will produce where it maximizes the profit. So that will be, yeah, where marginal cost and marginal revenue are equal. Yeah, so that will be at this point. So the quantity produced will be Q1. Yeah. Now, the price that the monopoly will charge, however, yeah, is not the price, yeah, on the marginal of the marginal revenue here. Yeah, but the monopolist, yeah, because yeah, a monopolist has price setting power. Remember, a monopolist will produce where marginal cost and marginal revenue intersect, but they will, yeah, the monopolist will simply charge the price on the demand curve. The monopolist will simply go straight up on the demand curve to point A and charge the price P1. Yeah. So this explains why, yeah, monopolies are expensive. Yeah. Or when there's a monopoly, we pay high prices. Yeah. So essentially this relationship here explains it, but it doesn't stop there. Yeah. Monopolies are not only about high prices. They're also about underproduction. Now, as consumers, we can see and feel the high prices. Yeah. But that's not the only consequence of monopolies. So let's take a look. If the monopoly were a competitive company, where do you guys think it would produce? If this were not a monopoly but a competitive company, what would be their production decision? What do you think? Anyone? All right. Yeah, if this were correct, yeah, if this were a competitive company, it would produce where marginal cost and price are equal. Yeah. The price being the marginal revenue in a competitive company. But here marginal revenue and demand are not equal. So the marginal cost and demand curve intersection point are different. You see, it is, yeah, it is to the right hand side. Yeah. So essentially, if this were the case, yeah, if the monopolist were a competitive company, it would have to produce where marginal cost and the demand curve meet. And that would result, as you can see, in a lower price. Yeah. If we go left to the y-axis, yeah, the price would be lower than the current P1, but also the output quantity would be higher than Q1. Yeah. You see a competitive company has lower prices and produces more. A monopolist has higher prices and produces less, yeah, than the marginal social benefit. Yeah. So, or then the intersection point of marginal cost and marginal social benefit. Now, it doesn't stop there. Yeah, so monopolies, now we know that monopolies have high prices and they underproduce. Okay, these are not the only two, yeah, consequences of monopolies. There's something more going on here. If you take a look again at the cost curves, yeah, let's take a look. Let's come back where marginal cost and marginal revenue are equal. What do you guys notice about the graph relative to, or what do you notice about the intersection point relative to the average cost curve? Yeah. Anything? Anyone? All right. Do you notice that the intersection point is below the average cost curve? What would that mean for a competitive company? Yeah, if this company were competitive, this would be shut down territory, remember? Yeah, this would be shut down territory. Yeah, a monopolist, though, can do this. Yeah, they can get away with it. A monopolist can get away with producing below its average costs because it can charge the price that is way above the average cost. Yeah. If you look at point A and the distance to the average cost curve, yeah, this becomes the monopolist's profit. Yeah, so basically a monopolist has no incentive to be efficient, yet to produce above its average cost. It can afford to produce below its average cost and make up for it by simply charging the higher price on the uh, demand curve. Yeah. So three consequences of monopolies: high prices, underproduction, and inefficiency as well. Yeah. The inefficient part, not all monopolies are inefficient. Yeah. I have to say that. Some monopolies, in fact, do produce above the average costs, but not all. Yeah, monopolies can get away with producing below the average costs. However, monopolies always have high prices and they always underproduce by default. Yeah. And often, but not always, they also produce inefficiently or below their average costs. Yeah. So essentially, these are the three outcomes, of monopolies that I wanted you to take away from today's talk. And next week, or next class rather, we will again go more into the calculation part. But for you today, the key takeaway points are essentially these. Yeah, why monopolies exist, and basically production decisions, pricing decisions of monopolies, and why monopolies uh, have these features. Yeah. All right. Yeah. Any questions from you guys? Okay, I'll start with some review questions next class. All right. So please do go through the slides. Yeah. Read that passage in the chapter as well, and we'll revisit that on Wednesday. Okay. Great. All right then. Yeah, thanks again. And I wish you a great day, everyone.